The East China Sea was rolling violently. A series of Chinese naval warships deployed in formation. The cannons were simultaneously raised and pointed far away. A series of anti-ship cruise missiles were launched from multiple launchers at the same time, creating long smoke trails that tore into the sky. The exercise was simulated as a real attack. The entire fleet operated at the highest level of readiness. But then something unexpected happened. One of the missiles did not follow the preset trajectory. It strayed from the training area and headed straight to the northeast, where a patrol ship of the Japanese Coast Guard was on a routine patrol. On the Japanese radar system, the warning signal flashed continuously. Before the officer on duty could react, the ship's hull shook violently. A column of white smoke rose from the bow. The Chinese missiles had hit. An explosion that was not part of any scenario. 3 sailors were thrown into the sea, the front bomb section burned. The automatic combat system immediately activated, the gun cells turned towards the Chinese formation. In the Chinese Fleet Command Center, a series of chaotic signals appeared on the screen. An officer tried to lock the control, but everything was out of hand. In a few short seconds, both sides realized there was no way back. The Japanese close-range guns fired continuously, armor-piercing shells plowed into the steel hull of a Chinese frigate. The Chinese side immediately counterattacked. A series of cruise missiles launched from the nearest ship, drawing faint smoke trails on the insect. 2 were intercepted by the Japanese Aegis system, but 1 still penetrated. Hitting the stern, the destroyer was damaged, flames erupted, the ship gradually listed. But the crew still held on to the guns operating from Bungtao Izumo. The Japanese commander ordered to upgrade to the highest level of combat status. The radar system expanded its scanning range. Dozens of F-15 fighter jets took off continuously in the sky. The formation split into attack directions. One group approached from the east, the other group circled behind, aiming at the Chinese Type 52D destroyer. A smart bomb was dropped accurately. The Chinese ship was smoking, the flames rolled to the ammunition depot behind. Rescue ships rushed over, but before they could get close, 2 more counterattack missiles from Japan landed. The atmosphere in the Chinese command room was thick. A general clenched his fist, ordering the entire fleet to switch to actual combat mode. Missile ships, frigates, and landing ships simultaneously changed formation, surrounding the Izumo area. The entire sea was shaken by the endless counterattacks. Japan did not retreat. The close-range artillery systems continuously fired red bullets sweeping across the sea surface, cutting through the smoke columns covering it. A Chinese warship was hit by a bullet in the fuel depot, exploded, and gradually sank. The Japanese rescuers saw the floating wreckage, but there was no time to stop. The battle had truly begun. Both sides knew this was no longer a missold exercise. This was an inevitable clash. The fighter squadrons continued to dive into the air, launching air-to-air missiles. The East China Sea was covered with streaks of white smoke. The Japanese soldiers were still holding out in the control room of the half-burned destroyer, controlling the last guns. The storm had officially begun. From a great explosion, the entire East China Sea suddenly turned into a fiery battlefield. So what is the next development of the story? Who will be the winner? Before going into the next content, please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the latest videos. While the Japanese ship was still engulfed in smoke and fire, the entire command system of the Coast Guard immediately switched to full-scale counterattack mode. The signal from Izumo rang out on all military frequencies. The entire formation opened fire. A series of cruise missiles were launched from the destroyers Maya and Haguro, rushing straight towards the Chinese formation spread out at the edge of the disputed waters. The white smoke columns stretched into the sky, reflecting a dazzling light on the water. Just a few seconds later, the first attack hit its target. A Chinese frigate caught fire from the stern, lost control, and spun in circles in the middle of the sea. The sailors tried to put out the fire, but the flames spread faster than the reaction. China did not stand still. They immediately counterfired with close-range guns and anti-ship missiles launched from destroyers at 52D. Bullets flying densely in the air fell into the sea like rain of fire. A rocket grazed the side of the Japanese ship and exploded underwater, sending up a wave column more than 10 meters high. The waves crashed into the belly, taking with it some equipment, but the main guns still maintained a cold and accurate firing rhythm. In the air, Japanese F-15J squadrons began to take position. They rushed in a double attack formation, launching consecutive air-to-ship missiles towards the Chinese ships. Small fire circles flashed in the dim sea. Each ship was hit. Black smoke rose. A Chinese 16 ship tried to cut the way to intercept but was locked on by the Japanese radar. An explosion echoed. The plane never returned. The Japanese command room remained eerily silent. Each command was carried out immediately. The ships coordinated smoothly, firing missiles in turn to maintain pressure. On the Mgizumo, the F-315B pilots prepared to take off. Each engine roared loudly. The ship shook slightly. Then the first plane soared into the sky, trailing a white mist. From afar, the Chinese fleet still tried to maintain its formation. A destroyer opened its radar to detect the F-315B group approaching. The anti-aircraft missile was launched, flying straight into the clouds, but the Japanese jamming system worked perfectly. The missile lost its direction, fell into the sea and exploded harmlessly. The Japanese counterattacks became stronger and more precise. An F-35B dived low, dropping a smart bomb that hit the middle of the Type 55's hull. The impact caused the ammunition compartment to explode. The entire ship gradually sank in black smoke. The Chinese formation began to fall into disarray. Some small ships had to retreat, creating a gap in the defense line. Japan took advantage of that opportunity, sending 2 destroyers to approach the central area. At that moment, no one thought this was a training accident. This was real war. Chinese officers were forced to call for reinforcements from the coastal base. Japanese radar immediately detected a new movement signal. 4 more warships were making false turns. In the sky, the scattered lights of Chinese bombers began to appear. But Japan did not retreat. The Air Defense Force deployed a screen from the Aegis ships. The enemy missiles had just flashed when they were intercepted in midair, creating a series of explosions. From the command post, the Japanese commander calmly ordered to maintain the firing rhythm, concentrating firepower on the center. On the sea surface, the Chinese warships were caught between 2 streams of fire. Explosions followed each other, pieces of steel were thrown into the air. A frigate tried to escape but was followed by 2 bullets. With a flash of light, the ship disappeared under the waves. The remaining warships were forced to split up, weakening the overall battle situation. After nearly an hour of continuous fighting, the Japanese fleet maintained the initiative. The sea surface was full of half-burned shipwrecks, but not a single Japanese sailor retreated. On Izumo Island, the round red flag still fluttered amidst the gunfire and sea breeze. The pilots turned around to prepare for the next attack. From the east, a giant block of steel appeared on the Japanese radar screen. It was the Chinese aircraft carrier Shandong. Accompanying them was a powerful escort formation of destroyers, frigates, and supply ships. The battle order was immediately given, no longer an immediate response. Japan officially entered the strategic offensive phase. The Izumo, which had been upgraded to carry F-35B fighter jets, immediately switched to full combat readiness mode. The pilots rushed to the cabin, each engine roared and took off one by one, forming a long line against the smoky gray sky. At sea, the Japanese destroyers spread out, expanding their formation, preparing to intercept the Chinese fleet. From the other side, Chinese J-16 and J-15 aircraft took off densely from the bronze paint, forming metal clouds that rushed straight towards the enemy. The sky turned into a giant electronic grid where radar, jamming, and missiles intertwined into a deadly net. Japan took the initiative to attack first. A squadron of F-35Bs flew at low altitude using the sea terrain to avoid radar detection, approaching the Chinese escort group at a distance of only a few dozen nautical miles. The whole squadron simultaneously launched smart bombs and targeted, for armor-piercing bombs hit the ammunition depot of the 55th destroyer. The explosion spread like a firestorm, lifting the entire ship above the sea before it broke in half. The Chinese side counterattacked fiercely. The close-range guns operated at full capacity, creating a dense wall of bullets in front of the Shandong aircraft carrier. Many Japanese bombs exploded in midair but were not enough to stop the entire attack. An F-315B was hit by an anti-aircraft missile and fell into the sea, leaving a long trail of smoke and light spreading in the air. At medium altitude, the air battle broke out fiercely. China's D-16S flew in a grid formation trying to lock on the old F-15 target, but the Japanese electronic warfare system caused the locking signals to be disrupted. One F-15 seconds. Taking advantage of the opportunity, launched 2 air-to-air missiles to shoot down 2 seconds 16 consecutively. On the ISIMO, the signal confirming the victory rang out but no one celebrated. The battle was still long and any mistake could cost lives. The Eastern Sea now had no boundaries. Burning shipwrecks, lifebuoys, and broken metal pieces were floating everywhere. A Japanese escort ship was hit by a bullet in the burning stern but still tried to turn its cannon to attack one last time. Its cannonballs hit the navigation radar of a Chinese ship, paralyzing the control system. From afar, the Shandong ship dispatched 3 more bombers equipped with cruise missiles to attack the command ship ISIMO directly. The Japanese radars detected it early and immediately activated the defense system. 2 missiles were intercepted, the other grazed the bomb on the starboard side, causing the ship to shake. 1 compartment was punctured, but ISIMO maintained its speed and continued to launch aircraft. In the Japanese command center, young officers continuously updated data from the battlefield. Every minute, 1 ship was damaged, 1 aircraft disappeared from the radar. However, the battle was gradually tilting in their favor. The Chinese warships gradually lost formation, many ships lost contact due to interference and bullets. The last Japanese 1 F-35B in the squadron returned, refueling right on the Izumo's ship. The pilot had just stepped down and had not yet removed his helmet when the alarm sounded again. The radar detected a new signal from the south. Data showed that China was sending the Liaoning aircraft carrier into the battle zone, preparing for a full-scale attack. From the eastern coastal base, China urgently established a new defense line. A series of HQ-9 anti-aircraft missile launchers were deployed along the coast. The long-range radar continuously scanned, covering the entire airspace above the fleet. Offshore, Shandong still maintained its central position, acting as a giant mobile fortress. The escort warships formed a protective circle around it. The inner layer was destroyers, the outer layer was frigates and high-speed missile boats. From the Japanese side, ISIMO led the attack group to slowly approach the air. F-35B and F-15 coordinated patrols, maintaining continuous pressure. The destroyers Maya, Atago and Haguro moved into thousands of cannons and missile launchers towards the Chinese formation. The Japanese fleet did not directly hit the center, but split into 3 directions, relying on radar advantage to set a trap when the distance between the 2 sides was less than 150 nautical miles. China opened fire first. A series of cruise missiles were launched from the Type 52D ship. The wind blew straight towards the target. The Japanese radar immediately reacted. The Aegis system activated. Each of the defense missiles was fired and exploded brightly in the sky. Some were intercepted, but a few still got through. Hit a Japanese escort ship on the left side. The ship tilted sharply, smoke billowing out, but the front cannon continued to fire until contact was lost. The Japanese side counterattacked immediately. Anti-ship cruise missiles were launched in series, hitting the Chinese outer line. A escort ship was torn in half and burned fiercely. The sea surface was filled with black smoke trails. Red circles of light reflected on the waves like the eyes of a giant monster in the sky. Japan's F-35B launched a low-altitude attack. They skimmed the water surface, passed the radar scan range, then suddenly rose up and dropped smart bombs on the air defense ships. 1 bomb exploded in the command center of the east deck, shaking the entire ship's deck. The sailors on board were thrown off, but the ship remained steady. The close-range guns immediately returned fire, sweeping across the air, forcing the Japanese squadron to disperse. In the thick smoke and steam, the Chinese radar began to malfunction. Many electronics from the Japanese ships caused the target identification system to be incorrect. Many anti-aircraft missiles were launched that missed their targets and fell into the neutral waters. Those shells exploded meaninglessly, creating a rain of fire that scattered across the water surface. Japan took advantage of the opportunity. The destroyers opened all their long-range guns to fire at the center of the enemy formation. The East China Sea shook with each wave of water and smoke. A Chinese destroyer was hit by the secondary ammunition depot and exploded into pieces. The signal from that ship disappeared from the radar, leaving a blank space on the screen. To the south, China still tried to maintain its coastal defense line. HQ-16 surface-to-ship missiles were launched consecutively at the Japanese ships, but their accuracy was greatly reduced due to interference. Most of the shells fell into the water, some hit close to the target, but were not strong enough to penetrate the armor. The Japanese sailors calmly kept their formation and continued to advance. When the two fleets were close to a distance of only a few dozen nautical miles, the artillery battle began. 127 mm mortar shells and 76 mm artillery shells simultaneously fired, raining down on the sea's surface. A Japanese ship was seriously damaged and had to retreat to the back of the formation. At the same time, a Chinese ship also exploded in the midsection, burning brightly like a floating torch. In the midst of the smoke and fire, the Japanese soldiers still held tightly to the steering wheel, their eyes fixed on the flashing radar screen. They understood that if Shandong was allowed to hold, this war would be much longer and bloodier. The signal from the command center rang out again. Next target, the Shandong aircraft carrier. All the big guns turned to face the East China Sea after hours of chaos, preparing to receive the fiercest attack since the beginning of the war. From the northeast, a huge radar signal appeared. It was the U.S. Ronald Reagan Aircraft Carrier Strike Group leaving Yokohama Base, heading straight for the battle zone. Without any announcement, their presence was a clear warning. Japan was no longer fighting alone. The Chinese fleet realized it first. The coastal command stations immediately switched to red alert status. The communication signals between the warships were intense, each command was short and cold. Shandong was still in the center, but now around it there were many escort ships missing. Some were sunk, others were withdrawing for temporary repairs. The Japanese side did not miss the opportunity. Izumo advanced another 10 nautical miles. The Maya and Higuro destroyers lined up in thousands, opening all their long-range radars. In the air, the F-35BS patrolled in a coordinated pattern with U.S. reconnaissance aircraft. Real-time data exchange, the entire combat area was covered by a dense positioning network when the Ronald Reagan entered the operating range of the ship, which lit up. Dozens of F-A-10 fighter jets took off continuously towards the Chinese formation. Tactical signals were transmitted directly to Izumo. For the first time in history, the two forces were fully coordinated on a real battlefield. The F-A-18S dove through low clouds, dropping guided bombs on the Chinese ship cluster. An escort ship was hit twice in a row, listing to the starboard side and sinking like a stone. China responded immediately. Long-range missile launchers from the coast opened fire simultaneously, aiming at the position of the Ronald Reagan. However, the U.S. long-range defense system intercepted most of them right from the first trajectory, exploding in the sky. From the south, South Korea also began to move. A squadron of X-class destroyers entered the neutral zone, claiming to be participating in the protection of international shipping routes. In reality, they were encircling Shandong. Further away, the Australian fleet also appeared under the pretext of humanitarian assistance. But no one believed in the word humanitarian at this time. The East China Sea was becoming a multinational battlefield on the Izumo Bung. The Japanese commander ordered an expansion of the attack range. F-15JS and F-315BS coordinated attacks on coastal targets to destroy China's coordination radars. Each smart bomb fell precisely, turning the radar stations into giant columns of fire. China's command network was broken into pieces. In the center, Shandong began to be surrounded. The remaining escort ships tried to create a defensive barrier. But the firepower from Japan and the United States was too dense. Every minute, dozens of artillery shells and cruise missiles were coming. One shell penetrated the Shandong's hull and exploded in the auxiliary fuel tank, causing a fire to spread. The sailors tried to control it, but black smoke rose hundreds of meters high, and the sea surface was bright. Waves of attacks alternated between Japan, the United States, and South Korea, turning the area into a furnace. The Chinese ships returned fire, but few shells hit their targets, and many fell into the sea and exploded in vain. China's radar was constantly weak, communication channels were cut off, and the commander had to switch to manual methods. The command was given via optical signals, a sign of despair in the middle of the modern century. From afar, the Liaoning formation was advancing. China tried to pull in more troops, but the fleet was heavily damaged. Izumo and Ronald Reagan held their positions. Launching the first coordinated missile wave, the red lights flashed in the sky, reflecting on the sparkling sea surface like thunder. In the center, the mountain gradually collapsed, the fire engulfed the stern of the ship. From the deck of the Izumo, F-315Bs carrying air-to-air missiles and guided bombs took off one after another, creating a flashing green light streak in the smoky sky. At the same time, on the other side of the battle line, dozens of Chinese 20 and 16-wing aircraft soared up, spreading out in a fan-shaped straight towards the Japanese fleet. The space above turned into a maze of radar, heat rays and interference. The attack order was issued almost at the same time. The first streaks of light cut across the sky. A series of air-to-air missiles left the launchers and flew at terrifying speeds. A 16-wing aircraft was hit and turned into a fireball in midair. Meanwhile, a Japanese F-15 was hit in the wing, lost control and was forced to eject, its small white parachute floating in the sea of flames. No one knew the fate of that pilot. China deployed saturation attack tactics, launching missiles in succession to overwhelm the enemy's defense system on the Izumo radar. Dozens of bright spots rushed in at the same time, the air defense systems worked at full capacity. Each interceptor launched like a deadly flower explosion. Some missiles were destroyed high above, but many still got through. Exploding near the destroyer Maya caused the entire ship to shake violently. Japan immediately counterattacked. From a height of 7 m, a group of F-35Bs dived at a steep angle, launched smart bombs and collided with the Chinese escort ship. 2 bombs hit the target, one rose high, the fire reflected on the fuselage, creating a brilliant yet brutal scene. At low altitude, the F-15S flew between anti-aircraft artillery shells, dodging each stream of fire, shooting down another 2 seconds and 20 seconds with heat-seeking missiles. Shandong was still the center of the battle. On the ship's deck, close-range guns continuously fired ammunition to create a dense defensive ring. Every second, dozens of bullets flew off, creating streaks of light across the sky. An American F-A-18 entered the area of fire. It was hit in the belly and burned, leaving a long trail of black smoke in the sky. Below the sea, the Japanese destroyers continued to fire support bullets. Each missile flew up like a spear through the clouds. The air battle quickly spread throughout the area. Pairs of planes changed direction and circled close to the sea. The 16s tried to approach from behind but were detected by the F-35B's early warning system. Just a few seconds later, 2 air-to-air missiles were launched, blowing up both enemy planes. The shockwaves spread out, causing the sea below to surge. From afar, a group of U.S. tankers appeared, maintaining the fighting strength of the Allied forces. The Japanese pilots quickly approached to connect the refueling hose in midair and then turned back to the battlefield. No one rested, no one stopped, the entire sky became a non-stop operating machine. The Chinese side began to deploy extremely strong electronic countermeasures. The ground-based jamming system was activated, causing the Japanese and U.S. radars to flicker. The signals on the command screen gradually opened. Many pilots temporarily lost contact. The hand-to-hand coordination tactics between the F-35B and F-15J helped them maintain the initiative. Every time they flew, the optical system and thermal sensor replaced them, maintaining the ability to lock on the target. In that chaos, a fateful moment occurred. A Japanese pilot discovered a loophole in the cave defense formation. He piloted the F-35B to dive down, cut a dangerous angle of attack, and launched an armor-piercing bomb into the middle part of the giant ship. The bomb penetrated 2 layers of steel and exploded in the hangar. The fire broke out and spread out. The alarm siren resounded throughout the ship. Black smoke rose hundreds of meters high. Chinese rescue helicopters circled around, but the Japanese fire continued to pour down. Part of the ship's deck collapsed, causing the aircraft above to fall into the sea like red-hot steel fragments in the winter sky. The halos continued to flash endlessly. The air battle reached its most intense level, and the fate of the entire Chinese fleet now hung in the fire that was burning their main aircraft carrier. While the sky was still bright with intersecting bullets, the East China Sea below hid another war, cold, silent, but no less brutal. At a depth of more than 300 meters, the Japanese submarines began to move. In the dense darkness of the Sona Sea, the deep sounds of the enemy were heard, signaling the approach of the enemy. The submarine Sorrel, the pride of the Japanese Coast Guard, was at the head of the formation. On the Sona screen, bright dots moved densely. It was the Chinese escort formation trying to protect Shandong from underwater attacks. The captain gave a slight signal, the entire silencer system activated, and the ship quietly glided like a ghost. At the same time, China also launched 2 Yen-class submarines equipped with heavy torpedoes. They moved in parallel, the quest Sona actively hunting for the enemy. The sound pulse spread across the seabed and reflected off the bodies of the reefs, causing the space to vibrate. Any mistake, even a small noise, could turn the submarine's position into an absolutely silent SOAR unit. Only the dim red light in the control compartment slowly moved the depth needle and stopped at 290 m. From here they could clearly see the Chinese ship's reflection signal. The captain ordered the first and third launch hatches to prepare the 89th torpedo. 2 torpedoes left the launch tubes and flew like steel balls, leaving a narrow water trail. On the Chinese ship, the Sona warning sounded, but it was too late. The first torpedo hit the middle of the frigate's hull and split the ship in just a few seconds. The second torpedo hit the fuel depot, creating a giant water column that shot up to the sea surface. The entire area was submerged in waves and oil smoke. China immediately responded with a Yen-class submarine launching a series of depth charges to search for the Sorya's location. The explosions echoed deep, the water pressure causing the Japanese ship's hull to explode. Some equipment was thrown off the support, the lights flashed wildly, but the ship still maintained its depth and moved sideways to the west, avoiding the bomb's trajectory. The sailors held their breath. All sounds disappeared. Only the heartbeat of the fire and the sound of the engine gradually faded. In another area, the Japanese submarine Korea also entered the attack position. It detected the Sona emission signal of the Chinese submarine. The commander ordered to launch fiber-optic guided torpedoes. The 2 bullets flew in absolute silence, closely following the target through the precision control system. A dry explosion rang out. The Chinese submarine was hit at the bow and exploded, leaving a giant column of bubbles rising to the surface of the water. On the sea surface, Japanese and American warships received the signal confirming the destruction. They immediately deployed a flare, illuminating an area of water to search for any remaining traces of the enemy. But deep down, the battle was not over yet. Another Chinese submarine detected the strange Sona signal, and it was Koryu. It immediately launched 2 counterattack torpedoes in the Koryu control room. The warning sounded. The sailor turned the wheel hard. The ship dived to a greater depth. 1 torpedo grazed the stern, the second exploded less than 50 meters from the hull. The shock wave pressure caused the hull to crack slightly in several places. Water leaked into the auxiliary compartment. But Coral still survived. The ship fired counterattack torpedoes, hitting the enemy's Sona source, causing the anti-submarine ship to disappear from the screen while the sea surface above was still ablaze from the air attacks. In the depths, the Chinese submarines quietly sank to the bottom. The bubble column broke into a sparkling silver streak. The underwater war ended quickly, but the consequences were terrible. The Chinese defense line, the seabed boundary, was completely wiped out. Immediately after receiving the signal that the sea was clear from the submarines, the Japanese command immediately activated the Celestial Eagle Plan, a comprehensive preemptive strike from the air to finish off the Chinese fleet before Liaoning could recover. The entire western sky of East China was immediately lit up by jet streams from Izumo and Kusa airbases. Dozens of F-2 and F-35B bombers simultaneously launched on radar, forming a giant arrow formation heading straight for the center of the Chinese formation. At sea, the Japanese warships lined up horizontally, ready to fire support fire. The US and South Korean fleets stood behind, forming a closed defensive circle, ensuring that all enemy retreat routes were blocked. On the Chinese side, the coastal radars that had been restarted after the previous destruction immediately detected the sudden signal. A series of HQ-9 anti-aircraft missiles were launched, creating dense smoke trails, but the low-altitude F-35Bs used electronic interference to disable the anti-aircraft missile guidance radars, which flew off course and exploded into the clouds. The Japanese commander on Izumo gave a brief opening order. Immediately, the first series of smart bombs was dropped. They flew through the clouds, falling precisely into the concentration area of the Chinese destroyers. Huge columns of fire erupted, seawater was sucked up by the explosion, and then collapsed, creating waves tens of meters high. A Time 52 ship hit by 3 consecutive bombs broke the hill, disappearing from the radar. In the air, Wire 20 and Wire 16, China tried to cut off the counterattack route. The Japanese F-15s were ready. Pairs of planes rushed into each other at supersonic speeds, launching missiles continuously. One 20 seconds was hit, caught fire, and exploded. An F-15 was also damaged, forcing the pilot to eject into the sea. The confrontation was lightning fast, brutal, with no room for hesitation. Under the sea, the Chinese fleet was in chaos. The command ships were destroyed, causing the coordination system to stop working. Many warships fired randomly and fake radars. While the friendly ship was approaching, the stray missile fell into the Allied area, causing 2 Chinese ships to collide and burn. The Japanese side continued to bomb the remaining command points. A guided bomb hit the coastal radar station directly, causing the entire anti-aircraft missile coordination area to be paralyzed. At the same time, 3 F-35Bs rushed straight towards Shandong. The ship was still smoking, trying to move out of the Japanese artillery range. The lead pilot locked on the target. 2 anti-ship cruise missiles were launched, wiping out like 2 silver spears. One hit in the middle and exploded, destroying the aircraft control part. The other one hit the fuel tank, causing the entire ship to shake. A column of fire more than 100 meters high rose. Shandong, the pride of China, was now just a red-hot block of steel. Not stopping there, Japan launched a second wave of attacks. F-2 bombers appeared from the southeast, dropping armor-piercing bombs on the area Liaoning was approaching. One exploded near the bow, causing the ship's hull to crack. Liaoning still tried to maintain speed, but the radar and runway were severely damaged. The support takeoff was completely halted. At low altitude, the US F-A-18 dived and fired 2 more long-range missiles into the Chinese defense area. The whole sky shook with continuous flashes of giant fireballs that fell onto the sea, blocking the radar's view. When the smoke cleared, most of the Chinese fleet had been defeated. The Japanese commander clenched his fists, his eyes turned towards the distant columns of smoke. He knew that this preemptive strike would not only destroy the enemy's main force but also hit their spirit. The western sky was red not because of the sunset, but because of the flames of war. On the sea, the waves lapping around the charred wrecks attested to the most ferocious preemptive strike in modern naval history. Japan had regained control of the disputed waters, but behind this storm lay a giant shadow waiting for an opportunity to counterattack. On Izumo's radar screen, the western part of the East China Sea now emitted only a few scattered signals. Most of the Chinese fleet had been sunk or lost contact. The remaining ships struggled to make their way to shore, forming a chaotic retreat formation. In the air, black smoke still swirled around the last bright spots, the remnants of the most ferocious preemptive strike the region had ever seen. The Shandong aircraft carrier had lost all combat ability. The fire still smoldered on the deck. Rescue helicopters circled helplessly. Many sailors had to jump into the sea to escape. In the distance, Liaoning was also seriously injured. Its navigation system had stopped working, its bow was broken. The escort ships around it now only served as temporary cover for the retreat. The entire central area of the Chinese fleet disintegrated. Japan and its allies did not let the game go by. Yumo led the way, moving slowly but surely to close in on the fleeing formation. The destroyers Higuro and Igo split into two directions, launching a pursuit attack. Long-range guns fired continuously, columns of water stood upright in the middle of the sea. A Chinese destroyer was hit right in the middle of the ship, tilted sharply, and sank in just a few minutes. The Japanese soldiers stood still without cheering. They knew this was no longer a fight but a finale. From above, the F-35B continued to circle. The radar detected a cluster of Chinese ships trying to escape the combat zone. 3 planes immediately dove down, the guided bomb room cut off the retreat route, a huge explosion broke out, waves spread out hundreds of meters, the sea surface boiled, black oil streaks spread widely, the fire reflected on the smoke like a burning mirror. Meanwhile, China's communications system was in complete disarray. Coastal command posts were paralyzed due to the loss of communication with the planet. All mobilization orders had to be carried out by low-frequency radio, which was both slow and prone to interference. Many naval units did not receive timely instructions and were isolated in the middle of the sea. Some small warships even surrendered and sent distress signals outside the landing zone. In the northeast, the Allied forces continued to tighten the siege. The aircraft carrier Ronald Reagan and its escorts formed a wall to prevent China from leaving the area. US F-A-18s flew parallel with Japanese F-15Gs to pursue and clean up the remnants. Whenever the radar detected a strange signal, air-to-ship missiles were immediately launched. There was no uncompromising warning. Liaoning still tried to maintain its speed, but the heavy hull and cracked hull made all efforts in vain. When Japan launched the second volley of missiles, 2 hit the stern, causing the entire ship to shake. A chain explosion occurred, smoke and fire engulfed the giant ship in the command room, the lights went out. At that moment, the Chinese fleet officially lost both of its main aircraft carriers. Japanese rescue helicopters flew low, dropping buoys into the oil-filled sea. Many Chinese sailors clung to them, their eyes empty, no longer willing to resist. Further away, the half-burned ships were still capsized, their bodies rising and sinking in the waves. The East China Sea was no longer a battlefield but a giant steel cemetery. When the last Chinese radar signal disappeared, the Japanese command system issued a brief announcement. The battle area was under control. Light cheers rang out in the open, but no one smiled. Everyone understood that this victory was not a source of pride, but a harsh warning about the price of arrogance. On the horizon, the sun rose amid the gray smoke, the eastern sea was calm again, but below, thousands of tons of steel were still sinking, bringing with it a terrifying silence. Japan had gained absolute control of the disputed area, and the war that had begun with a stray bullet ended in the most disastrous defeat in the history of the Chinese Navy. As the sea gradually calmed, the last columns of smoke also disappeared into the void. All over the eastern sea, there were only shipwrecks, oil slicks and pieces of metal spinning in the waves. No more cannons, no more jets, only a heavy silence like a tomb. China officially issued a ceasefire notice. The command was brief, without a word of explanation. The surviving ships were ordered to turn around and bring the wounded to shore. The whole world watched, witnessing the moment when a once absolutely confident naval power bowed its head and retreated amid the smoke and fire it had caused. The Japanese fleet remained in position without firing another shot. From the Izumo, the commander looked through binoculars and saw life jackets floating on the sea, mixed with ship debris. He ordered the rescue ships to lower boats to pull the survivors up. The silence between the former opponents was heavier than the explosion of war. At the Yokosuka base, the Japanese flag was raised without any celebration. The sailors returned, their faces blackened by smoke, their eyes sunken with sadness. They knew this victory was too costly. Hundreds of people had fallen on both sides. But history will record that Japan defended its waters with all its might. The Chinese side was in crisis. 2 aircraft carriers were destroyed. A series of warships disappeared. Thousands of soldiers were missing. Public opinion at home was in turmoil, but the government only issued a vague statement that the training mission had been completed. No one believed that the East China Sea had become a testament to the failure of misplaced power. A week later, the United States, South Korea, and Australia withdrew their forces, leaving Japan to guard the central region. Electronic surveillance fences were erected, marking a new boundary, a line that no one dared to cross. On the water, Izumo quietly turned its bow back to port, its red and white flag still fluttering in the wind, reflecting the cold sunlight of the sea. The war that started with a stray bullet ended with the collapse of an entire pride. The East China Sea returned to calm, but in people's hearts the aftershocks still lingered. No victory is truly complete, and no strong man stands forever on top. In the midst of that silent sea, only the shattered silhouettes of ships lying at the bottom bore witness to a lesson.